Good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone joining the fifth webinar of the fourth edition of the National Startup Awards on Globalizing the Startup Movement. I'm Gaurav Thareja, investment specialist at Startup India and your host for today's session, and I'm really excited and honored to be here with you all. Entrepreneurship is a driving force behind global innovation and economic transformation, playing a crucial role in the growth and opportunities offered by the startup movement. In line with this perspective, Startup India has introduced the fourth edition of National Startup Awards. The primary objective is to acknowledge and reward exceptional startups that have showcased remarkable capabilities in developing innovative, scalable, and impactful business solutions. This year, the awards encompass 20 categories, including women led innovation, rural area impact, healthcare and educational social impact, livelihood enhancement, and many more. Recipient of these awards will be granted a whooping cash prize of INR 10 lakh in each category, while both winners and finalists will receive valuable support such as government connections, investor networking, and market access to aid their growth and success. We have the pleasure of hosting an exceptional group of industry experts and remarkable startups today, all set to share their invaluable insights and experiences. But before we dive into our engaging conversation, we would like to invite you to a walkthrough video that provides a comprehensive overview of the National Startup Awards 2023, also known as NSA 2023. I hope the video was comprehensive enough for you all to understand the whole procedure. Now, I'm very excited to introduce our esteemed industry expert, Ms. Dipakshi, Director, Government Affairs and Public Policies at Dell Technologies. In her role, she focuses on advocating for necessary policy changes, enabling opportunities to support business of the future, and evaluating and mitigating potential risks and crises. She plays an important role to bridge the gap that exists in innovation using high class Dell technology and her expertise in public advocacy. Holding an MBA with distinction from the Asian Institute of Management and specializing in marketing and strategy at HEC Paris, she exemplifies excellence and a drive for results. Welcome to the webinar, Dipakshi. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday evening and sparing time for our audience.
Thank you so much for that very benign introduction, Gaurav.
Great. So now let's begin with the first question, if you're ready. So, Dipakshi, since you have been closely related with policy forming, my question to you is that what are the key challenges and opportunities you see in the process of globalizing the startup movement? And how can policymakers, corporations, and entrepreneurs collaborate to overcome these challenges and leverage the opportunities?
Thank you for that. If I have to break that into a couple of, I would say, a couple of buckets. It's always, oftentimes we of course talk about the story, and which has a lot of merit. Today, we do see a lot of economy, not yet a lot of startups have a very strong growth path. But I'll start perhaps, just future that to me are the most pertinent that, if any, the local ecosystems have to come together to address. To me, the first and foremost challenge for any startup, the lens that you mentioned, Gaurav, going global. I'm not just talking about the startups, therefore, that are perhaps homegrown, but also have the aspirations of really making a dent globally. One is there will always be, while we talk about globalization a lot more, we talk about globalization. Increasingly, you also see the requirements of the countries, requirements of the populace, the cultures that all really it dictates a deeper market understanding and a market understanding that's way deep. And if I were to perhaps, quote, and this might be a rather notorious example here, when we talk about the power of data that's there with social media, the way the audience profile is changing is perhaps very, very dynamic. And while on the one hand, it's an opportunity because that gives you an avenue to understand your clients, your customers, your potential market more and more. On the other hand, we are also seeing that increasingly the markets every region included. They are really going localized first, or for that matter, nationalism first. From that lens, it's incredibly important to get a deep understanding of not just the market, its preferences, but also how can you really localize and really be relevant from that market. Now, since you mentioned that large ecosystem, of course you see a lot of governments playing that role from a G2G perspective, right? Those two, Startup India and DPIIT, for really bringing its initiatives like this, because a lot of conversations that policy can actually enable many startups, I would say a big chunk of startups would not really have access to those conversations, and platforms such as this, they actually address that very critical issue of access to information that unfortunately exists despite really being an information age. That being one, the second big issue that perhaps we see on a day-to-day basis, or for that matter, in most of the global conversations, is really around access to capital and funding. It's one part to say that a startup perhaps has access to capital, or for access to capital you really need to raise money, or for that matter you get back to your family and you pull in resources from there. But at the same point in time, if you're globalizing, there are way too many buckets that you are checking. And from that lens, can, as a nation, can from a policy perspective, the access to fund, the affordability of even getting that fund without really sacrificing too much of your equity, what is that equation there? Again, while, and this is a double-edged sword, right? It might be an issue, but on the other hand, that's also one of the easier ways to expand into other markets by really partnering with similar local ecosystem players there. Because by the end of it, if I talk about the first part that I was talking about, market understanding around really localizing or globalizing the requirement, not such thing as really getting somebody who understands that market as well, right? And third, and I'm very, very passionate about this, perhaps also because as a policy professional who's working in the IT hardware industry for the last 7 years out of the 18 years that I've worked, is regulatory mechanisms really need to pave the way for any venture to succeed. And if I say that is important for large firms or MSMEs, I think that is even more important for startups. Because by the end of it, one part is if there are different regulations, and I'll specifically speak about, let's say, the product focused startups. If you have different regulations that guide your hardware in different in different countries, your supply chains will only be able to customize to XYZ locale. And that is where perhaps I think policy has a big, big role to play. Another facet, and that we see increasingly, is with this increasing paradigm of the frontier technology, which is really going to effectively be based on not just data, but how are you automating decisions? How are you really making the machines more smart? You would have, and over the next 2 to 4 years, we would all see an influx of policies that is really going to drive what this regulatory framework is. If there is not a common minimum that really binds these geographies together, that perhaps is going to really be an impediment in homegrown startups going global. And while I'm talking about that, I'll also touch upon this one very pertinent issue, and I think it's what academic and industry debates really thrive on, but that's also what really comes first, innovation or regulation, and how can both not really step in the way of one another, right? By the end of it, perhaps innovation is always going to take the front stand, and regulations will have to catch up. But the regulations also have to catch up in such a way that they do not throttle innovation. But then at the same point in time, the equal onus lies on innovation to really be responsible from the word go. Having said that, and talking about opportunities, and I think opportunities are really, really immense today as we speak about. And with the world really going global, with anybody really be able to work from wherever somebody wants to build a venture out of, there is, of course, I would say immediate as the immediate first low-hanging fruit, it's an access to a larger market. Going back to the basics of management, whether it is about access to a newer market, access to a newer need, access to a newer product, uh, that canvas has suddenly become broad. And the minute we talk about frontier technologies, such as, or for that matter, manifestations of that, such as ChatGPT, really stepping in, the localization part, perhaps while it becomes easier, it becomes even more important that you are culturally tuned into what you're really positioning as the next step, let's say, or for that matter, when you're expanding into any other market. The second big thing there also is going to be the innovation and tech transfer. Today, and this again is an antidote to what I really initially mentioned about most of the markets really going inward. But if you look at it at the base of that is really a fear of losing out that opportunity to, let's say, an entity of another country or another nation, where that competitive advantage might come in, or disadvantage might come in, since we're talking about challenges and opportunities. From that perspective, there needs to be better tech transfer agreements, because by the end of it, the opportunity is really going to be immense. It's not really going to be culminated at one specific geography. And the more discussions we have, the more critiques and reservations we raise, the more, I would say, robust this discussion really will be. And I think it's really great when we talk about, let's say, an initiative such as, and I mentioned this earlier, but the way we see the governments really getting their skin in the game, especially kudos to Government of India, the way we have really owned the startup charter in the last 4 to 5 years, you really see that difference. You really see that behavioral difference where startups, and I was in a conversation with somebody from the ministry earlier today, and I'll quote that gentleman that is the CEO of MSH, that one of the biggest advantages of the Startup India movement really has been that as a nation that typically has been risk averse, we have got this into the discourse that we want to take more risk. We really are normalizing people to be job creators than just job seekers. And I think just by that attitudinal shift, the opportunities that are there in front of us are just immense. I'll pause here because I can actually go on and on. This is a topic of massive passion, as you would be able to see.
Thank you so much, Dipakshi, for that insightful discussion. And you are correct that we are creating a lot of jobs in this nation. And it's actually the risk appetite of the entrepreneurs, and we wholeheartedly give credit to them for shaping up this movement and bringing us so much success. Now, moving on to the next question. You have worked with both corporates and you have worked with various startups, and I believe that you have had your own stint with the startup. So, how has your experience been in both corporate as well as startup sectors in shaping your perspective for globalizing the movement?
So, organization piece, as let's say second part of the question, a couple of things, and again the pros and cons of both the setups. Um, as a startup founder or as a founding team member in two startups in the career stint, perhaps the most exhilarating thing has been that you're not really defined by a role, and the fact that you can be as entrepreneurial as well as entrepreneurial as possible, because it's also about you see opportunities more than you see the issues in going after those. And I think that is something that corporates, or for that matter, the more formal industry can really learn from the startup spirit. And perhaps, which is why you see more and more larger corporations really have the entrepreneurs in residence now who really help you think through all these, uh, I would say, all these fruits that you would otherwise miss out on. But I also feel that that's the same thing at times, which if you don't really have somebody who is focused on expanding the startup right from the beginning, you might lose out on the market momentum to really scale and go global. And what I mean by that is very often that I've seen, and this comes out from my conversation with a lot of founders. Till the time the roles are not very clearly defined, everybody is really enthusiastic. But then, who is employee number one syndrome at times kicks in, and that kind of really spells a death knell. For that matter, there might be this charm really of being the CEO and the CTO and the CIO. By the end of it, the startups that are really doing well have very clearly defined roles in terms of who's expanding and who is thinking about what really next is in the lineup, what is really the vision of the startup. From a globalization perspective, it is so important to have that as the base. It cannot be an afterthought. If you're building something for global audience, if you're building something that is going to be, for that matter, more fluid in terms of the audience it's going to speak out with, it's important that it's part of your product design or your solution design from day zero. Having said that, something that organizations perhaps do very well, and again, because of the siloization and hedoization of who's doing what, is really manage resources well. Most organizations will ensure that you don't really have to spend a lot of time doing the admin work. Let somebody take care of that, and you can really focus on the job. But speaking from the lens of an erstwhile startup part, um, I would say when you're really doing everything that is under the hood, at times it's important to know what you can delegate and what you cannot. So, for example, today, if you can actually delegate, lease out products, or just get your products on a lease, figure out, or get people to help you figure out your workloads, think how you can be more agile, get help when you require. And I'm also talking about startups that are not tech first. Unfortunately, we are at in a day and age where even the non-technical startups would really have to have some level of tech initiation. And it's not important that you might have all the answers at the beginning. Uh, it is critical to raise your hand, because by the end of it, and taking a cue from your earlier question, Gaurav, how can industry, academia, government, startups can all really work together? Perhaps more and more the debate is really becoming more of the coexistence of these four, for that matter, uh, how organically they fit into each other's agenda. And from that lens, perhaps it's rooting it to the right people, the right experts, even for strategies, even for figuring out your operation plans, even for figuring out how you're going to save your working capital. All these things really, really become important. And unfortunately, I feel that especially when you're an early stage startup, you don't have time to think about these things. And that initial time can really make a lot of difference.
So I think yes, a key takeaways from your answer could be that entrepreneurship itself is such a big motivation for these founders, and secondly, how they convert these challenges into opportunities and how they are creative with everything that come up on their even the multiple hats that they wear. It's really commendable. Last question is somewhat linked to the first question. So I want you to expand more on what are the key factors that hinder or facilitate the international expansion of startups. You mentioned that there are certain technological advancements that may hinder or help facilitate these startups. And based on your experience, what certain strategies approaches we can take so that these solutions are solved at a granular level.
Sure. Uh, I would perhaps, start uh, a very technological evaluation aspect of the startups, right? It is a misnomer that, or I would not say it's a misnomer, but I would say it's to each his own kind of a setup. One, you really need to be true to where in the value chain you are, and therefore, whether you need to go cloud first, whether you need to go on prem first, whether you need to go hybrid. There is no one common solution from an ID standpoint that is going to really, be a fix all for startups across the board. And why I say that is, very often you would see massive startups, and I'm talking about startups with, which have grown beyond 200, 300 people and who are still on cloud. If it suits into your business model, cloud is great. We also provide cloud services, right? But then very often you would realize that if you're just strategic about your workload management around how your solution architecture should be built in, you can actually save about 40% of your monthly expenditure just that goes into your IT enablement. And I'm not using that just as an anecdotal evidence. I'm sharing that because it's also one of the key areas where the awareness lacks about where costs can be reduced despite you really picking up that pace and despite really going global. And that's just one example here, right? Second big thing that I feel is really the approach, or for that matter, a barrier. It can be again both. Uh, and we have a strong demographic dividend today, right? But then what is the level, let's say, of the existing talent that is there in the country? By the end of it, the scale up plans really, really need to be considered into whoever is going global. Um, More than that, it's not just about talent, let's say, in a particular nation. It's also about the talent discussions that are happening at a G2G level, the critical areas that are being earmarked as common areas of interest, as common areas of growth, as common areas of innovation. And if you're talking about globalizing, or for that matter, taking a homegrown startup into other geographies, it's absolutely critical to have that pulse of the other country as well, because by the end of it, the mark, and I'll go back to the first question itself, right? Uh, the hold on market understanding, the hold on that strong ground up research is so critical. And in that itself comes a big chunk of a skilling factor that is there. The third big thing is, of course, there's a lot of conversation, and I would say the Moore's law, we really see it, manifesting much faster today than we ever saw it earlier, right? That necessitates that we are not just limited, or the startups that are there are not just limited by what is it that they have up their arsenal right now. The way things are changing, the way the benchmark is shifting, it's so critical to be agile, to be nimble, to really figure out that, okay, what worked in one market will not work in the other market. But if there is that additional opportunity, can I really get the right talent, right funding, right ecosystem to help me get started on that one? And the last piece, and I would say this is purely from the lens of the role that I have at Dell Technologies, even in the last 7 years, right? Everybody in the industry, or for that matter, people in the same industry, are not always your competition. At times, they are your biggest collaborators as well. Because by the end of it, especially where there are challenges which are not just specific to you as a startup, but they also touch upon, let's say, the other ventures in a similar industry, the voice of collective reason is way more than voice of individual reasoning. And that is where knowing who your audience is in another country, knowing which those industry bodies are, which are those trade bodies in the other countries that you can leverage, that you can dip into their knowledge base. What are the government focused agencies that are there to promote investment, such as Invest India and their counterparts in other countries? It's critical. And case in point being, if we just look at this entire scenario just over the last 4 5 years, it's really been at an inflection point, because now you really have somebody who's driving these conversations center forward. And even though there are different factions, there are different organizations that want to promote it, everything is kind of culminating really together into one form of pyramid. And for somebody, and for a startup that really does not have time to think about beyond expansion and beyond product, getting these ready answers can really be a game changer. So delegate as much as you can, leverage these existing frontiers that you already have. I'll pause there.
Perfect. Now we have some amazing and interactive questions from our audience. So, question number one is, how is that specifically for product startups, since you represent Dell? So, we have a question specific for that. How can they internationalize their market strategy?
So when you say international, that's the 10,000 or one, uh, just about the via the uh, to become relevant to another country. Do you really require more action. The pulse of that national, when we're talking about say, the current loads, we have insight into what is going to happen next 3 years down the line, 12, sorry, months down the line, 3 months down the line, 12 months down the line. Those pieces will play a very important role. And since since this question mainly focuses on the larger strategy, it's important to also consider, sit back and assess whether your current workloads can really take that. And again, since the question is really broad, Gaurav, I would recommend whoever the person is to get in touch, and I'd be happy to actually get more insight into what this question is more about, because this is otherwise a very broad question.
Perfect. And I think next is about dealing with corporates. So, what are the some prerequisites that a startup must keep in mind before they pitch to a corporate or before they engage with them?
That's a great question, actually. And kind of uh, very, I have the story on if you not explain what you stand for, what you do to a corporate, you not always, an in-person conversation. That it also needs to translate into an application, and you might not do somebody else on the other side. So you really, long story short, you need to have a very strong narrative that tells the story of who you are, what you're there for. The second thing is, it's very important to tag and tell which stage of the startup do you have an are you the right people, are you not right? Do you have any people who have backed up what you're doing right now? These things might come, or these things might just sound very logical to anybody who is from a startup ecosystem. But when you're dealing with corporates and you don't tag your, I would say, your USPs upfront, it's very it's very easy for somebody in a corporate to lose interest there. The third, not every corporate would have an answer to everything that you're looking at. And I say I would say this holds true for any mentor-mentee relationship. It holds true for any customer and producer. Know what you need the corporate's involvement in for. Do you require them to expand your market? Do you require them to or mentor you in some form? Do you require them to perhaps, if 2 years down the line or 6 months down the line, this is how you plan to grow? How are you more agile to be really focused for that? You need to be clear in your mind in terms of what you really want to come out of that relationship. Very often, and I will say this with utmost sincerity, most corporates, even though they would run a lot of startup support programs, the funding that would go to a startup would be really, really minuscule. But there are still a lot of other avenues through which they would want to engage proactively. So do your homework, do your background checks, and most of this information is going to be available across most of their social media handles. And it's always good to find a connect, whether through common bodies such as Startup India or through LinkedIn, or create a connect, understand more about a corporate, and then go and hit them with that specific ask. And I think these three things would really help you bring out what your asks, but then you're also very smartly what you bring to the table. Because it's also important for the corporate on the other side to know where they really fit into what you're doing.
Perfect. I think that's a great to-do list that startups can note down before they present themselves in front of a corporate or any private stakeholder. Once again, thank you for the insightful session, Dipakshi. I'm sure the startups have enjoyed this whole and benefited from this interaction and are able to take some key takeaways learning from your journey.
Thank you so much, Gaurav.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to now announce that who we have with us today, a visionary entrepreneur who led his startup to win National Startup Award in the previous year. Mr. Subhash Narayanan is the esteemed CEO and founder of Sascan Meditech. With a background as an accomplished physicist and a strong expertise in various scientific disciplines, he is leading Sascan in revolutionizing cancer detection in the oral cavity and cervix. Backed by prominent organizations and recognized with prestigious awards, Subhash and his team are making significant strides in early cancer detection and contributing to the transformation of healthcare. We welcome you, Mr. Subhash. So, Mr. Subhash, I believe we can't hear you. Can you try unmuting yourself, please?
Hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, good evening, everyone. It's a nice opportunity for me to get involved in this program. And I'm basically a researcher through entire my life of 33 years. I have been working in a R&D institute in Trivandrum, where I was involved in remote sensing of vegetation and other things. It's a national institute, and after completion of my career there, I founded this company in 2015. That is Sascan Meditech. Our vision was to create photonics. Can you hear me? There is a break in between. Photonics involves knowledge about physics, spectroscopy, electronics, and also it's a multidisciplinary field. So there are a lot of difficulties in managing the things very smoothly, because in a startup ecosystem, we start with a very small team and then go forward and build a strong company going forward. Yeah, you can ask the question, specific question you can ask.
Perfect. Perfect. We can begin with that round. So, first question is, how can the startup ecosystem contribute to the advancement of optimal diagnostics and therapeutic applications in biomedicines? Are there any specific areas within this field where startups have shown promising innovations or disruptive approaches?
As you rightly said, the startup ecosystem plays a crucial role in driving innovation in several ways, especially in the biophotonics domain. The first part is in the technology development. The startup ecosystem can contribute in the development of new optical technologies that enable accurate diagnosis of early diseases, and also in the treatment or management of diseases. So advanced imaging technique require information about new sensors, new data processing algorithms and all. In the startup ecosystem, what is needed is that one should be able to prototype and develop the products in as early as possible, because the time span is very little. So there has to be some rapid prototyping facilities available in the ecosystem that can be utilized for prototyping. And to test these also, there should be some kind of facilities where you can do EMI, EMC testing, especially for electronic components. So that kind of testing facilities are the ecosystem that will help a lot in making the prototypes. And then once you make the prototype and test it, you have to clinically validate it. That's a major challenge which most of the startups have to face. So test this clinical validation, you have to collaborate with the hospitals or the research institutions to test your device in a real life situation. So these are some of the challenges we face. And another important aspect we have to look at is how we can make the system affordable. Affordability is a key aspect of it. So you have to design in such a way that the cost is less, and the product is affordable to the large population and made accessible to the population in the rural sector, especially for cancer products. We have to see that especially oral cancer is a disease that affects the rural population more than those living in the city. So we have to design in such a way that the product can be operated with minimal use of electricity and power requirements. So we have to design such that the product can be used in a massive screening programs in the rural segment. So this is one of the key areas we have to work on. And then the use of data analytics. We have to see that the user the screening results at the point of care itself. We have to provide, because these people don't come again for the screening or checkup. So at the point of care, you have to provide the screening results. So we make use of cloud-based algorithms and also that the analysis can be done at the point of care and the user can be given a proper feedback. These are some of the things we had to see that the system meets, when you design such a system. So these are major concerns. that need some of them can be provided by the ecosystem. Another important aspect is that when you have to sell the system, you have to have your own patent when you devise a thing. So the patenting support and all these kind of ecosystem do provide in India, because these are some of the major things one has to take care of when you develop a novel product. You have to protect it not only in the country, but you have to go for international patent, the PCT filing, then the US patent filing. All these have to be taken care of in a startup ecosystem. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for highlighting the role of technology that one needs to emphasize on while building a product or a service. Now, as a physicist bridging the gap between engineering and medicine, Mr. Subhash, what are the key challenges you have encountered in integrating optical technologies into clinical practice? Are there specific regulatory or standardization issues that startups in this field need to consider while scaling their solutions globally?
The major challenges is in ensuring that the device meets the medical regulations, medical regulatory standards. So what we have to do is we have to implement the QMS, quality management systems, complying with the ISO 13485 2016 early on in the company itself. Otherwise, when you because you have to keep the different versions of the design process. Actually, when you design a thing, you don't it multiple iterations happen. So all the design files are to be kept in a systematic manner, complying with the ISO regulations. So the quality management systems are to be implemented in the company, and you have to go for ROHS compliant components in that. So whatever things you use should be according to the medical regulatory standard. These standards have to be met rigorously, otherwise you will not get the permission from the CDSO or the regulatory bodies once you develop a product. Then interacting with the CDSO. Right now we have the medical rules in place. When we started the company, there was not much of a rules in place. So, but however, still we went for the ISO 13485 certification early on, so that we don't face any challenges going forward. This is one of the things we have to take care of, most importantly.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think
Other aspects, as I told you, are the cost factors and all you have to consider for that the system can be accepted. And another is the compliance with the health records. The hospital health records, how they are maintained. Our system should be compatible design. Our software should be designed compatible with the hospital medical record system. And when you collect patient data, you should ensure that the patient data is served in proper secure servers and all. And the patient information, especially the patient private information, should not be shared with anybody. These are some of the things we have to take care of when you serve the data in the cloud servers and all.
okay. Thank you for providing us the insight on what should be the key parameters one should be on lookout for before developing a product in biomedical field. My third question comes around technology. We know that the technology is ever evolving and there are new approaches coming in and out every day. As a physicist and a researcher, how do you stay updated with the latest advancement and ensure that your work remains at the forefront of innovation? What advice you would give to startup founders and researchers in terms of continuous learning and staying ahead in the dynamic field?
The technology is advancing every day by day. So you have to keep abreast of the latest development. So toward that, we have to go for attending conferences. That is one of the things. And workshops and conferences you have to attend. You have to attend some webinars in the domain you are working with, and you have to subscribe to some journals or magazines like biophotonics or optical spectrum when you are in biophotonics domain, and look for the latest technological developments in the domain. And foremost is the collaboration with the hospital. You have to keep the collaboration ongoing with the hospital so that you can develop things according to the need of the people who are going to use it. The user's requirements are to be met, and such a way that adopting the newer technological development, you can devise newer devices so that they meet the requirements. And I would suggest that every company should not rely on one product itself. They have to have multiple products. Company should have some focus on R&D. For medical technology devices, company to be successful, you have to focus on R&D, and you keep on innovating. You bring in new versions of the product so that you can be a leader in the marketplace.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for this. So now I would like to open the floor and see if we have any options, any questions from the chat. and interact with the audience. We have a question saying, what benefits were you able to avail after being awarded as a National Startup Awardee and as a part of national hand-holding support, and how this added value to your organization?
So, as a startup award winner, we had the opportunity of being part of the Indian contingent for various conferences. We were part of the Vivatech conference in Paris, and there we could showcase our product to the larger audience there. And that is a major boost for us. We can interact with the not only our own people from India, the leading limelight industrials from the country, but from other places also, so that we can strike some partnership deals, and we had more projection on the collaboration possibilities with the marketing setup there in the Europe and all. And again, we had another opportunity of going to the Dubai also, Arab. This Dubai festival, we were there as part of the Indian contingent. There we could do pitching competition there as far as, and then again did a 1 or 2 days demo program there with the audience. So it was a very good experience for us to interact with the people and get connected to the industry expert there, and have a possibility for engaging into some kind of marketing relationship with those people there in that country. These are some of the benefits we derive from being part of the Startup India challenge and winning the competition.
Perfect. Secondly, my question would be, what are some key things that these startups should keep in mind while filling out the form? You can share your experience when you were one of the applicants, some key things you mentioned, what should be given out as text to make sure that your product or service shines out in the application pool.
So one of the things we always did was, to have a multi-product thing. So we were always looking for new product developments. And when you make a product, you should look for areas. Suppose sometimes the market potential in that particular domain may be different. So for example, we were looking at a device to treat early stage cancers actually, using a technical photodynamic therapy. We built the prototype, then we realized that with the current technological development, there's a good potential for using that device for treatment of diabetic foot ulcers. So we pivoted that product into a device such that we can use it for treatment of antimicrobial infections in the wound, that are drug-resistant bacteria are there. That's a major concern. So we are pivoting that product into another person. These are some of the opportunities that come on the way you are developing a product. So you should be able to accept these things and pivot your product such that you can see very good market potential for that kind of device. Instead of sticking with one plan, you should have varied plans to see how you can sell the product. This is my experience, from my experience. And so for that matter, you have to collaborate with the hospital who can help you with the number of patients needed for validation, and then get the required clearances from the CDS's office to see that you can bring the product in a shorter time frame into the market. This is what everybody should look for.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your guidance. So really appreciate your time for coming on this webinar and enlightening us with your journey and experience. As we wrap up, I would like to extend my immense gratitude to our speakers on behalf of the entire Startup India team. It was a pleasure having you. Your insights were informative and inspiring for startups and budding entrepreneurs from across the country. Before we end this session, I would like to encourage all startups to apply for the National Startup Awards. This is a great opportunity to showcase your innovative ideas and gain recognition for it. If you haven't already, please visit the Startup India website and register your startup today. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a great evening ahead.
Thank you, Gaurav, and Startup